Look, imagine this. You're making $75,000 a year. You finally feel like you've made it into the middle class. You've got a decent apartment, maybe a car payment, you're contributing to your 401k, eating out on weekends. Then inflation hits, and suddenly your grocery bill is up $200 a month, your rent increases by $300, gas costs an extra $80. And here's the crazy part. You're actually worse off than someone making $35,000 a year. Wait, what? That doesn't make any sense, right? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down today. And I'm telling you, once you understand this, you're going to see your entire financial situation differently. My name is Dexon, and I spend way too much time thinking about how economic policy quietly destroys the financial stability of everyday people. If you're someone who feels like you're doing everything right financially, but somehow keep falling further behind every year, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Here's the thing most people don't understand about inflation. It's not just about prices going up, it's about which prices go up, when they go up, and most importantly, who gets hit hardest by those increases. And look, when you hear politicians or economists talk about inflation, they throw around this average number, like, oh, inflation was 3.2% last year, as if that number means the same thing to everyone. But that's complete nonsense. The inflation you experience is wildly different depending on where you are on the economic ladder. And the middle class, they're getting absolutely crushed in a way that most people just don't see. Let me show you what I mean with actual numbers, because this is where it gets really interesting. Let's say we've got three people. Person A making $35,000 a year, lower income, person B making $75,000 a year, middle class, and person C making $500,000 a year, upper class. Now, inflation hits at 7%, which is close to what we saw in 2022. Here's what most people think happens. Everyone's costs go up by 7%, so everyone loses 7% of their purchasing power. Fair, right? Wrong. So wrong. Here's what actually happens. Person A, making $35,000. They're spending almost everything they earn, let's say 95% of their income on necessities. But here's the key. They likely receive government assistance, maybe $300 a month in SNAP benefits. They might qualify for Medicaid, possibly housing assistance. When inflation hits, those benefits often increase as inflation. SNAP benefits, for example, were raised by 12.5% in 2022 in response to inflation. Their wages at the lower end actually tend to rise faster during high inflation periods because minimum wages get adjusted and there's pressure on employers to retain workers. Person C, making $500,000, they're spending maybe 40% of their income on day-to-day expenses. The other 60%, it's going into investments, stocks, real estate, maybe they own a business. And here's the kicker. During inflation, asset prices often rise. Their investment portfolio might actually increase in value. Their real estate holdings go up. If they own a business, they can raise prices. Plus, if they have any debt, like a mortgage, inflation actually helps them because they're paying back that loan with money that's worth less. Person B, making $75,000. They're screwed. And here's why. They're spending about 75 to 80% of their income on necessities and regular expenses, but they don't qualify for any government assistance. Zero. They make too much money on paper. Their salary doesn't adjust quickly. Most middle-class jobs give annual raises of maybe 2 to 3% if you're lucky. During 7% inflation, you're losing 4% of your purchasing power every single year. They probably have some savings, but not enough to really invest in inflation-protected assets. Maybe they've got $20,000 in a savings account earning 0.5% interest, while inflation is eating away at 7%. That's a real loss of 6.5% annually. They just lost $1,300 in purchasing power sitting in that safe savings account. Now, you might be thinking, but Dexon, can't they just invest like the wealthy person? And look, technically, yes, but here's what most people don't realize. The middle class is trapped in what I call the liquidity prison. Here's the thing about being middle class during inflation. You need cash, and you need it now. When your grocery bill goes from $600 a month to $800 a month, you can't exactly sell off shares of an index fund to cover the difference. When your car insurance jumps from $120 to $220, you need that money in your checking account. The wealthy can lock money away in real estate, stocks, bonds, even alternative investments. They can ride out the volatility because they're not worried about making rent. The poor are protected, to some degree, by the social safety net that adjusts with inflation. But the middle class, they need liquid cash for things like the rent or mortgage, which probably just increased, car payments, and good luck finding a used car that hasn't inflated 30% in price, insurance, which has gone up across the board, childcare, which has increased by an average of 5% annually, healthcare costs, deductibles, copays, prescriptions. So they keep money in checking and savings accounts where it's just getting destroyed by inflation. They literally cannot afford to take the risk of locking money away in investments, even though that's exactly what they'd need to do to protect themselves from inflation. It's this brutal catch-22. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, and this is something almost nobody talks about. There's this concept in economics called the Cantillon effect, named after an 18th century economist named Cantillon. And here's what it says. When new money enters the economy, it doesn't spread evenly. The people who get access to that money first benefit the most, and by the time it reaches everyone else, prices have already gone up. Look, let me make this super clear with an example. When the Federal Reserve responds to economic problems by lowering interest rates and pumping money into the system, who gets that money first? Banks, large corporations, wealthy individuals, and institutional investors. They get to borrow money at super low rates before prices increase. A corporation can borrow $10 million at 2% interest, buy real estate, expand their business, invest in assets, all before the inflation really kicks in. By the time that money trickles down to middle-class wages, which might take 12 to 18 months, prices have already increased. You're getting a 3% raise to deal with inflation that's already at 6%. You're always behind, always playing catch-up. The wealthy are at the front of the line getting cheap money. The middle class is at the back of the line dealing with expensive everything. Here's something else that makes this worse. And look, I'm going to be a little blunt here because this is important. The middle class is psychologically programmed to spend in ways that make inflation hurt more. What do I mean? When you're lower income, your spending is mostly on true necessities: food, basic housing, transportation to work. There's not a lot of fat to cut. When you're wealthy, you have so much excess that inflation barely touches your lifestyle. But the middle class, they're stuck in this weird zone where they're trying to look successful while actually being financially vulnerable. Here's what I see all the time. They lease a new car every 3 years because I deserve it. And now they're locked into payments that don't adjust for inflation. They buy a house at the top of their budget because real estate always goes up, without considering that property taxes, insurance, and maintenance all increase with inflation. They finance furniture, electronics, vacations, paying interest on depreciating items during inflation. Literally the worst possible move. I'm not saying people don't deserve nice things. I'm saying that the middle class has been sold this lifestyle that requires them to constantly spend at the edge of their income, which means when inflation hits, they have zero buffer. The poor have government assistance as a buffer. The wealthy have investments as a buffer. The middle class has debt. And speaking of debt, this is probably the most misunderstood part of the whole equation. You'll hear people say, well, if you have a fixed rate mortgage, inflation is actually good for you because you're paying it back with cheaper dollars. That's technically true. If you borrowed $300,000 at 3% interest in 2020 and inflation is 7%, you are paying that back with dollars that are worth less. But here's what they don't tell you. That only works if your income is rising with inflation, and we've already established that middle-class wages do not keep pace with inflation. So yes, in theory, your mortgage is being paid back with cheaper dollars, but those dollars are coming out of a paycheck that's losing purchasing power, which means you're actually feeling poorer even though the math says you're coming out ahead. Plus, the middle class isn't just carrying mortgage debt. They've got student loans averaging $38,000 per borrower, auto loans averaging $23,000, credit card debt averaging $6,500. And unlike the mortgage, most of this debt is either variable rate or it's at high interest rates that don't benefit from inflation at all. All right, look, I know this sounds depressing, but here's the thing. I'm not just here to tell you how broken the system is. I'm here to tell you how to actually protect yourself despite all of this. Here's what you need to do. Step 1. Accept that traditional savings are losing you money. If you've got more than 6 months of expenses sitting in a savings account earning less than the inflation rate, you're making a mistake. I'm not saying keep zero in savings. You need an emergency fund. But that emergency fund should be 6 months of expenses, not $50,000 sitting there losing 6% a year to inflation. Step 2. Invest in inflation-protected assets, even in small amounts. You don't need $100,000 to start protecting yourself. You can buy I-bonds with as little as $25. You can invest in a low-cost index fund through any brokerage with $100. You can buy fractional shares of dividend-paying stocks. The middle class has been convinced that investing is for wealthy people, and that's exactly why they stay trapped. Step 3. Focus on increasing your income, not just cutting expenses. Here's what most people don't realize. During inflation, cutting your grocery bill by $50 a month is not going to save you. You need to increase your income. That might mean negotiating a raise and using inflation data to back up your request. Switching jobs. Job switchers earn 15 to 20% more than people who stay. Starting a side business, even something small that brings in an extra $500 a month. You cannot budget your way out of inflation. You have to earn your way out. Step 4. Buy assets that appreciate or produce income. This is the move that separates people who survive inflation from people who get destroyed by it. If you're going to spend money on something significant, ask yourself, will this hold its value or make me money? A new car? No, it depreciates immediately. Skills training that leads to a higher salary? Yes. Designer clothes? No. A rental property, if you can afford it? Yes. A vacation? No, but experiences matter too. Just don't finance them. Step 5. Eliminate high-interest debt aggressively. Credit card debt at 22% interest during any inflation rate is killing you. That needs to be priority number 1. Use the debt avalanche method. Pay minimums on everything except the highest interest debt, and then attack that with everything you've got. Here's the bottom line. The middle class is getting squeezed because the system wasn't designed with them in mind. The safety nets are for the poor. The investment opportunities are structured for the wealthy. And the middle class is just expected to work harder and budget better. But once you understand how you're being squeezed, you can actually do something about it. You can stop playing the game by their rules and start protecting yourself. Invest even when it feels like you don't have enough. Increase your income even when it feels impossible. Build assets even when it feels slow. Because here's the thing. Inflation isn't going anywhere. This isn't a temporary problem. Understanding how to protect yourself from it is literally one of the most important financial skills you can develop. If this video helped you understand what's actually happening with your money, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I make videos like this every week breaking down the financial concepts that actually matter to your life. And drop a comment below. What's the biggest way you felt inflation hit your budget? I read every single comment and I want to hear your story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.